Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our facilities master plan town hall meeting. We're going to give everybody about another minute to join us virtually, and then we're going to get started with today's presentation. Thank you again for joining us for today's meeting. All right, everyone, it looks like we've slowed down with our attendees. So once again, thank you for joining us for our virtual town hall meeting today. Just so everyone is aware, we are having this meeting interpreted live. I want to thank Ms. Vanessa Rivera for providing the Spanish translation while I'm doing the English version as we go. So if you hear me talking slow or taking pauses, it's just so we don't overload and overwhelm Ms. Rivera as she's facilitating the Spanish version of this town hall meeting. So just to give you a quick overview of the way that we are going to proceed. I have a short slide presentation which provides an overview of the facilities master planning process. Starting with our why slide that you see now, we're going to talk about the process we went through, and then also the current considerations that we are looking at when we move forward with a facilities master plan. After the information presentation, which is a little bit more detailed information from the video series that hopefully you took some time to watch, we'll open it up for town hall, for questions, for comments, for discussion, so that we can make some informed recommendations to the school board as we move forward. So without further ado, to be respectful of everyone's time this morning, we are going to get started. So the first question you may have is, why are we considering a facilities master plan? And as you can see from this slide, there's three kind of core reasons as to why we need one and why now is the appropriate time to consider a facilities master plan. So first and foremost, we have years of deferred maintenance across our buildings. So currently, Norristown Area School District maintains 13 facilities, our 12 school buildings and the administration building here on Whitehall Road. When I talk about years of deferred maintenance, we're talking about although we have wonderful buildings and although we have beautiful buildings, we do have old buildings. Our new constructed building is Whitehall Elementary School, which just celebrated its 31st anniversary of when it was opened. Our next newest construction is Norristown Area High School, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Our remaining buildings are all significantly older than 50 than Norristown Area High School. When you talk about major renovations and additions to the buildings, the last major addition we did was to the East Norriton Middle School, and that was way back in 2006. So we've not done a major construction addition since East Norriton in 2000, since 18 years ago. We did do a smaller addition to the high school with the Obama era stimulus funds. But again, when you talk about major impact to the buildings, we've not done any significant projects in a lot of years. Because we've been an underfunded district, we have years and years and years of deferred maintenance. Old buildings are great. They don't build them the way that they used to. However, to update and modernize them does come with a significant cost, and we're going to talk about those costs a little bit later in the presentation this morning. So number one, the time is right to update our aging buildings. Number two, our district finances have improved and have stabilized. We've worked hard over the past I'll say, 6 to 8 to 10 years in the district to try to improve our district financials. As I said a little bit earlier, we are an underfunded school district and continue to be an underfunded school district, but we're not living in the dire financial straits that we have, in some prior years. Evidence of that is, this is the past 3 budgets, we've been able to increase staff and increase opportunities, all while not having to raise local property taxes. This year, as we're getting ready to, as we're working on the proposed budget for next school year, the 24-25 school year, we are planning and working with a 4th consecutive year of a 0% tax increase. And again, we're able to do so with, again, looking at, excuse me, increased staff and increased programs again next year. The last piece is a significant one, although it does have some unknowns with it, which is late last year, the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court ruled that the way that the state of Pennsylvania funds public schools is unconstitutional. From there, the court directed both the governor and the legislature to come back with a response of how they would fund schools differently. They formed the Basic Education Funding Commission, which released a report in January. Governor Shapiro announced his proposed budget for next year. And in that, he cited the court ruling and the commission's recommendation for a 7-year increased amount of funding to go to public schools. If that commission's recommendation were to be implemented, Norristown Area School District would see a significant increase in state funding, not only this coming year, but over the next 5 to 7 years if the state can figure out a way to fund it. The commission's proposal for next year is a $13 million increase in state funding for us, and over the 7 years would be a $53 million increase in state funding. Should we get those funds, we would be able to move on a significant facilities master plan and move forward. So, and because the judge is going to mandate that the state follow through with increased funding, that, as we said, when we talk about the why, the time now is appropriate for us to start to plan as if we're going to get those increases and to start to address our facilities. So with that, we currently, we're working on our district comprehensive or strategic plan for the next 3 years. The Pennsylvania Department of Education requires school districts develop a plan in 3-year planning cycles. We're very, very pleased that the school board just approved our proposed plan, which will take effect this July 1st, and will be in effect for the 2024 through the 2027 school years. As you can see in our comprehensive plan, we identified facilities in the learning environment as one of our 4 priority areas in our comprehensive plan. So we identified the why we need to develop a plan, and by including it as a priority area, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're putting it in writing that this is something that we're going to commit to acting on over the life of this next comprehensive plan, and probably the comprehensive plan after that, and maybe one beyond that. But very simply, we identified this as a priority with a very simple statement of improvements in district facilities are needed. From there, from that priority, we wrote 2 goals, which will be part of our 24 to 27 plan. Number 1 is to develop and implement a comprehensive facilities master plan that will carry us forward for the next 10 to 15 years. So again, this isn't a 3-year plan. This is really looking forward with the next generation of Norristown and Norristown students and families. And goal 8 is to define investments needed to complete a transformative infrastructure change that will support a modern and meaningful educational experience. So that's very simply means we're not just going to build to build. We're going to make sure that when we go through with this facilities master plan, that we are intentional, we are purposeful, that the changes that we make and anything we do is supportive of the student experience. and to make sure our students have school facilities that will help them on that last line that'll be life and future ready upon graduation. So let's get into the planning process that we undertook. So we know our why. We now know that we've committed to developing a facilities master plan as part of our comprehensive plan. So how do we go about doing this? Well, quite honestly, we went out and hired experts. We partnered with Schrader Group, which is a local architectural and school design firm, to help us through 3 parts of developing a master plan. First part is a feasibility study, which is what work needs to be done in our schools to update, renovate, and modernize. Second, it is an enrollment study to make sure that our schools have the capacity to meet the student population we'll have both now and in the future. And then the last and most important part of this was Schrader walking us through what is to consider, what is the best configurations of our schools? What are the best uses of our schools, our classrooms, our facilities? And did we want to or need to consider anything new or different from the way that we currently configure our 13 buildings and our 12 schools in Norristown Area School District? So let's start with the feasibility study portion of this. So Schrader came in and did a full evaluation of the 13 district buildings this past summer 2023. They looked at everything beyond everything. So they looked at architectural, they looked at code, they looked at structural, they looked at engineering, they looked at lights, they looked at floors, they looked at roofs, they looked at HVAC, they looked at windows and doors, they looked at parking lots, they looked at fields, they looked at floors, they looked at pipes, they looked at, again, anything you can imagine. From there, they generated a 3-volume, I have stacks of binders in my office with the complete of that review. Every page of that corresponds with a location in the school district. So I've shared at previous town hall meetings that, for instance, there's a page in there that corresponds to the renovation needs of a stairwell here in the administration building, that it needs new lights, it needs new floor coverings, it needs new stairwell treads, and again, all of the updates, switches, all those pieces are done. And there is a single page or more for every single location in every building in our school district. So again, this is a very, very, very deep dive into the updates that are needed. So if we just renovate, modernize, and update and change nothing, the price tag comes in at about $180 million worth of work that is needed. And of that $180 million, $30 million has been identified in high priority phase 1 needs within the first 5 years of the plan. So to go into a little bit of detail, I'm going to show 2 quick slides. 3 slides. So this first one shows the estimated cost, the improvement costs by location. Soft costs include architecture fees, permitting fees, and also anything that's not bolted down. So it'd be the replacement of furniture, classroom fixtures, things like that. So you can see just the cost alone is about $130 to $140 million. Soft costs come in at about $40 million. And the total cost, again, is that on that high side, about $180 million. It is important to note the $180 million are in today dollars, is if we could do all of this work in 2024. Please know, it would be virtually impossible for us to get all the work done under today dollars. Even again, if we just did this within the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, the cost would probably swell upwards of $200 million as labor costs increase and materials costs increase as well. Please note there is a double asterisk with Blackson Middle School that currently states renovation costs at $13 to $15 million. That does not account for any remediation we would have to do to become fully compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. So if we did want to renovate Blackson as is, the cost there to become an ADA compliant facility would be significantly higher. Here's a breakdown of Schrader looking again at the cost by location in terms of priority one. What are those must-do things that they say are 0 to 5 years? Safety, things that will keep us open, things that will keep us operational for in the next short term. Then you can see there's a line item for 6 to 10, and then there's some costs that go outward, that they say we could defer a little bit later beyond that 6 to 10 year window. What is important to note here as I zoom in on the priority one costs is if you look at some of our older buildings, Roosevelt Campus, Eisenhower, Bloxon, again, Bloxon does not include the ADA costs. You'll notice those are our higher renovation amounts. You look at Whitehall being our newest building, only has about $300,000 worth of immediate needs. You look at Paul Fly Elementary School at 1.8 million. That would also include their parking lot, which if you've ever been there, you know is a significant area of immediate need at Paul Fly. The North Centennial High School, although it is not it is one of our newer buildings, does have a high cost because, again, it is one of our largest buildings. It is our largest building in terms of square footage and student population there. So these are, again, all of the immediate things totaling a little over $31 million that, again, will keep us their immediate needs in terms of code, safety, and operations to keep those buildings open. So if anything, if we go down the road, these are about $30 million that we should and take care of first before we look at doing any of the other wants or needs in the building. So that's just a quick high level of the work that has to be done. So second, we need to take a look at our enrollment in terms of are our buildings sized right for now and for later. So with that, Schrader and this district partnered with Montgomery Education Associates to do an enrollment study. We've used the Montgomery Education Associates twice prior since I've been here as superintendent, and Bill and his team do excellent work. They've been within 2% accuracy in their studies, and I love sharing that the last study they did in the first year, they predicted Marshall School Elementary School's enrollment within 1 student. So again, Bill does a great job just understanding live birth rates, the mobility of how people move in and out of the district and within the district, and also the impact of planned future construction housing projects within the school district. So with that, we take a look at the projected number of students. We generate an individual building capacity, and then we look at capacity now versus capacity going out 5 years. Beyond that, we'll probably have to engage Montgomery again because the further you go out with their predictions, again, just the less predictable they become. But Bill, again, within that 5-year window, keeps his work is good within 2% accuracy. This slide, I know, is a lot of information on here, but if you look at the 3 lines, show you what the trends are going to be in our enrollment from the 2022 school year when Bill went backwards a little bit with his enrollment, going 10 years out to the 2032-2033 school year. And the blue bar is where, again, is that 5 years out window of where we're going to be. So if you look at the blue line, the top line is our elementary enrollment, and you can see that line is predicted to go down from where we are now and will decrease slightly before, again, it'll go back up to about where we were about 10 years out. Middle school, the yellow line, is predicted to decrease and stabilize over the next couple years. High school, as you'll see, is at a high point and will increase slightly before starting to trend downward over on the tail end of the 5-year window. So understanding where our population will go is important to understand our room. So from there, we worked with Schrader and took a look at the square footage, our room usage, and they go back and look at our buildings and compare it to building capacity. So at elementary schools, a good rule of thumb that the Pennsylvania Department of Education shares is elementary schools should use 90% of their square footage to determine capacity. So if you look at where we are, our elementary schools are currently and projected to operate within that 90%. So again, we're good now and we're good in the future. Middle schools should work at 85 to 90% capacity. And if you look at, again, those trend lines, middle schools are operating at or below that moving forward. So our middle schools have plenty of room. The concern is at the high school. The high school recommends that we operate at 80% operating capacity, and we're currently at or above those numbers now, and will continue to be there moving forward. We do have a little bit of room at Roosevelt campus, but again, that is a small building that really can't really relieve some of the overcrowding we have, because again, the use of that campus moving forward. So elementaries are good now and moving forward. Middles are good now. The high school has some urgency that we need to address it with some facility planning. So with that, we now know what needs to be looked at in terms of renovation. We know what where our enrollments are and our capacity are. So the last thing Schrader walked us through was considerations for reconfiguration. Do we want to use our 12 buildings differently or creatively, or do we want to look at doing some additional constructions to better optimize the teaching and learning experience for our students? Schrader has an excellent community workshop process, which is one of the core reasons we selected them. They facilitated 3 workshop meetings in which 40 and more shared interest partners participated. We had board members, we had administrative professional and support staff, we had parents and family members, and we had representatives of our community organization and community partners in those workshops. As we worked through the 3 processes and tried to come up with maybe some different options to reconfigure our building, there were some themes that drove our work. So the team came together and said, as we decision make, what are the things that we need to keep in mind to help consider maybe looking at things either the same or differently? These 5 themes were committed to and drove the process of considering options and moving our considerations and recommendations forward. So number 1, the committee felt strongly to best serve students, we should do more than just renovate, modernize, and keep the current configurations. They felt that we should look at different and better options for the use of our school buildings. Second, everybody felt strongly that we should provide 9th grade additional programming supports through facility planning, and by doing so, maybe address some of the overcrowding at the high school. Our 9th graders have struggled as they've transitioned up to the high school with academics and behavioral needs, and the committee felt that we should try to facility plan to provide some additional supports there. Number 3, the committee felt that all NASD students should come together before 9th grade. Currently, our students go out to one of their 6 in-neighborhood elementary schools. 3 do go through the Musselman Learning Center before going to their neighborhood elementary school. They then feed to 3 separate middle schools, and the first time our students come together as a community is in 9th grade at the Norristown Area High School. The community felt strongly we should look at options to have our students come together for a more unified and equitable learning experience before 9th grade. Number 4, our 5th graders should not be in the same building as our 8th graders. Currently, all 3 of our middle schools are 5 through 8 buildings. That change was made more than a decade ago and was done simply for building capacity when our elementary enrollment grew to where we could not house 5th grade in our elementary schools anymore. So the committee felt strongly we should try to see, can we come up with a configuration that would separate our 5th graders from our 8th graders? And lastly, that we want to maintain our neighborhood elementary schools to the greatest extent that we can. So from that, Schrader walked us through, again, those 3 workshops, and we were overachievers. All told, Schrader said we should start with 5, no more than 6 options. To the first meeting, we brought 10. From there, there were pieces we liked that we continued to discuss. We brought 7 options to the final meeting. And again, lots of great discussion, and those things were modified as we move forward. So where are we at now after the community workshop? Normally, Schrader ends that and brings recommendations to the board. I felt it was important that we start this town hall process because where we ended and what we're currently considering represents a bold reconfiguration that I'm going to walk you through momentarily. That bold reconfiguration also comes with an increased price tag. And you'll see why when we go through that. But to do what I'm going to present swells the the total cost from 180 million up to $330 million. And one of the important reasons why, again, we want to be very deliberate in getting people's feedback is we want to find ways to minimize the impact to taxpayers. So we want to sit there and gather input. Not only is this the good plan, but we want to make sure that we're hearing from our legislators. Are they going to move forward with the commission's recommendation for increased funding that would allow us to offset almost all of this, the cost of this facilities master plan moving forward. And again, trying to minimize the impact to our taxpayers who have been overtaxed over the past decade or two here in Norristown. So let's dive right into it in terms of, here are the considerations that we are going to ask for your thoughts and impact on, your input on. So number one, this addresses two things: additional programming for the 9th grade and relieving the capacity issues we're having at Norristown Area High School. So consideration number one would be to construct a new addition on Norristown Area High School that would house a dedicated wing for a 9th grade academy where they would receive all core subject classes. We would complete all other identified renovations at the high school. Again, this allows our 9th graders to remain at the high school, to have a more supported 9th grade experience, but to also still be up there for all the extracurriculars and have access to the great elective offerings that we have within Norristown Area High School. By adding a new wing, it also would relieve some of the capacity issues that we're having and give the high school some much needed space for programming and for our students up there. Consideration number two would be to consider, since we're adding so much new space up at the high school, to consider relocating the Roosevelt campus program to the current new wing, which was not the new addition we're talking about as part of this project, but the new wing of the high school that was done in 2008 and operate as a school within a school. The reason the committee came up with this is it would allow Roosevelt students to access the elective offerings at the high school and would allow them access to the extracurricular opportunities at main campus that they currently don't have over at the Roosevelt campus. And again, the committee wanted to offer that. We know that there are other considerations to doing that, but again, there was, with the new addition to the high school, this is something that we could talk about doing. Consideration numbers, the next set are going to talk about middle school and address those pieces. So consideration three would be to construct a new addition on the Eisenhower Science and Technology Leadership Academy. We would complete all of the renovations at Eisenhower, and then Eisenhower would become our 5th and 6th grade center for the entire district. So number one, this accomplishes separating our 5th graders from our 8th graders. And second, it accomplishes the theme of bringing our students together before 9th grade. And again, that more equitable and unified district experience of middle school. So if we're converting Eisenhower to a 5th and 6th grade center, you should not be surprised. The next consideration is, what are we going to do with our 7th and 8th graders? And that would be to construct a new addition on the East Norriton Middle School. We'd complete all the other renovations at East Norriton, and then East Norriton would be reconfigured to house all 7th and 8th graders for the Norristown Area School District. We'll talk about what we would do with Bloxon, our 3rd middle school, in a couple slides. Number 5, in keeping with our 3rd theme, we would keep all of our neighborhood school models for elementary. However, we would convert all of our elementary schools to a K4 configuration. We would need to readjust attendance zones to do this, but this would be done, again, to limit that transition into kindergarten and then immediately in 1st grade out of the Musselman Learning Center. And also, we know that we can better provide a breadth of service to our students if all of our schools operate as K4 at 7 sites. So with that, keeping our neighborhood schools and having them all operate as K4, we would complete all renovations at our current either K4 or 1 through 4 elementary schools. So renovations would be completed at Cole Manor, Davenport, Hancock, Marshall Street, Paul Fly, and Whitehall. Consideration 7 would then be to take the current Bloxon Middle School and turn that into a 7th K4 elementary school. but we would take the facility there and right-size it and modernize it. We would look to turn that into probably about a 500 to 600 student elementary school that would, again, allow our other schools the ability to absorb kindergarten, and also will give us room for to make sure that buildings could offer programs and get students back in their neighborhood and home schools. There's one of two ways we could do that. Option A would be to take the existing Bloxton Middle School building and to renovate it and complete necessary construction to convert it to a smaller elementary school building. Option B would be to build a brand new Bloxton Elementary School on the backfield on the same property. It is important to note that option B could cost upwards of $25 million additional dollars. That is, again, taking the low side of the Bloxton renovation costs and the upper end of what a new elementary school could potentially cost. That number probably would be smaller than that, only because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we would have to bring Bloxton School fully in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act, and those costs would probably make it closer to the same. Still probably be a little bit more expensive to build a new school, but it probably would only be within a $5 to $10 million difference between renovating and right-sizing versus building a brand new Bloxton Elementary School. So that would be school number 7 in our district. So with that, we would vacate Musselman as a kindergarten center. So how could we use that space effectively? The team wanted a consideration to be to convert Musselman to an English language newcomer center. This would provide intensive supports for newly enrolling students that are identified as newcomer and beginner English speakers. The idea of the English language newcomer center would be a shorter duration, high dose of support to ramp students up with the acquisition of English and academic supports. We do have a number of our students that come as newcomers that have interrupted and limited schooling that just need to get acclimated to school. And to do that in a smaller setting for a short period of time and then transition them back to their home school after that kind of ramp up period is the idea there. And then lastly, if we move the Roosevelt program out, we would consider moving district operation to the Roosevelt building. It would accomplish two things, which would be to provide much needed additional space for administrative operations and would make the administration building more accessible to the community right there on Markley Street. So I know that was a lot of information thrown at you in about the past 30 minutes. We're now going to move to the town hall portion of our thing. So with that, we're going to open up questions, thoughts, feedback, input of anybody that is on. I'm going to stop my screen share. Again, I want to thank everybody that has joined us as an attendee. So one of two ways that you can participate right now. You can either, one, raise your hand and I can activate you to speak and give your comment.
Para que les dé espacio para que hablen.
And thank you, Mr. DeRosier, for moving this
Gracias,
over to the main room. Or second, there's a Q&A box that you can type a question or a comment in which I'll be happy to read the question and answer to the best of my abilities. So with that, I will open it up for either hand raising and anyone who wants to give a verbal comment or to post anything in the Q&A box for us to answer. Oh, we have a question in the box. From Mrs. Musselman, thank you so much for your question. If the admin building is moved to Roosevelt, what happens to the existing administration building? That is a great question. And I will tell you, one of the things when you look at this process, this is not going to be a short process by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll just give you an example of what a potential timeline could look like. So if we brought this to the board, we'll say in June, and we got their approval for this as it currently exists, we would probably need 2 years just to do those phase 1, priority 1 projects. And with that, we also know that the first construction project we would need to take on would be the high school project. Again, we talked about the capacity issues there. We would not be able to break ground on that for probably somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, between getting the architectural work done, the permits, the funding, all those pieces in line. And then we're probably looking at a two to 2.5 year construction window to get that first project done. So even to get phase one, priority one work done and to get the high school piece done, we're probably looking at 4 years in. We then would probably take on the middle school piece, which would, while the high school's under construction, probably again, 18 months to 2 years of architectural permitting, financing, all that, probably 2 years plus to build. So I say all that to say, well, like the admin moving to Roosevelt probably wouldn't happen for like 8 years. And I think a lot can and will evolve over that window. But I don't have an answer for the administration building because to me, it's not something we would, I think as things go, things would definitely need to evolve. I think projects would evolve both on timeline and scope, as funding, all those pieces. So this would remain as an asset to us, and we probably would either find a need for student programming, for district programming, or, at the end of it, if we got it all right, I think there's always the possibility that we demolish the building and maybe put in some much needed athletic fields or some open space. So that hasn't been determined, but we want to hold on to this as an asset as the projects go in sequence, that we may need this. Or I know at one of the prior town halls, somebody said, well, instead of moving the Roosevelt program into the high school, what if we move that to the administration building and we get the students a closer proximity to the electives and the extracurriculars? It's a great idea. It's one of those things, we're going to hold it as an asset as we move through the project. I think the bigger pieces are going to be getting the priority one work done, getting the high school piece, like getting the major phases done, and then seeing as things move forward, how things will evolve. But we're not going to, sell it or unload it or do anything like that. So, but thank you for that question. And I thank everyone for bearing with me with a little long-winded answer on that. We do have a question. Do any of these projects require approval from the local voting blocks before you can proceed? So the short answer of that is yes. So even if the board approves this as a project, we'll say that, let's say they approve kind of this as a scope. The board would have to approve kind of each and every part as we go forward. So let's just even take that $30 million in phase one work. We're going to have to go out and get, scope of work. We're going to have to get proposals from contractors, and the board's going to have to approve the expenditure, the award of contracts, how much we're spending, for each and every part of that. The board's going to have to approve hiring an architect to design the new wing of the high school. They then would have to approve the financing before we can go. And there's approvals that we're going to have to do with PDE. So not only that, we're then going to have to go work with, like if we look at the first major project being at the high school, we're going to have to get building permits from West Norton to even be able to proceed with that. So to answer your question there's going to be lots and lots and lots of approval from our school board, from West Norton Township, from the municipality of Norristown, from East Norton, from Pennsylvania Department of Education. There's going to be lots and lots of approvals are going to be needed throughout the process as we go. So thank you for that question. Moving on, Mrs. Musselman's next question. I love the idea of having separate buildings for 5, 6, and 7, 8, since they are aged, so it's tough years for kids. Was the issue of busing considered, since now the district, we all know it is a case? So quite honestly, Mrs. Musselman, that's a great point. One of the things I mentioned in one of the other town halls when we ideated around this facilities plan was we tried not to get hung up on things like staffing and transportation in terms of let's plan big to get the setup for kids right. And throughout all of this, the throughout all of this, we are trying to set kids up for the most successful educational pieces. You know, in making sure we get the configurations right, we get the buildings modernized, and we're doing best by our kids. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to solve staffing. We're going to have to solve transportation. We do understand that transportation busing will look different. We understand at the mid-level that transportation costs will most likely increase because we're going to have to send all of our fifth graders to a single site, where right now there is some more walkability going with our three. However, when we readjust attendance for our elementary schools, we may be able to recognize some transportation savings depending on how those boundaries are drawn there. So we recognize transportation is going to be something we're going to have to solve, but we don't think it's going to be anything that should or could detract from the projects, you know, getting off the ground here. So for phase one work, will more teachers need to be hired, or will existing staff be enough? Overall, that's a great question. One of the things is looking at our district-wide enrollment. Between now and next year, we're going to hit pretty much a high point in our district enrollment. So I don't anticipate us having to hire new teachers based on student population. However, we are going to look to continue to invest more staffing to try to do things like reduce class sizes and do that as we go. But doing this as it is configured will not necessitate 25 new teachers to pull the plan off. Because like if you look at, well, let's just look at the middle school plan in particular, we would take the existing 5 middle school teachers that are at Bloxon and would distribute half to the 5-6 center and half to the 7-8 center. And again, the student population would work out that way. And actually, we probably would have to reconfigure all of our middle school staff based on their certifications. But we do anticipate staffing impact will be minimal. But as new money comes in, we're going to continue to invest to try to support students the best way that we can. So thank you for that question. Mrs. Milligan, good morning. You reference to the comments from the community town hall at Eisenhower. What are we doing with the feedback and comments? So great question. We've been collecting them at our in-person town halls, and obviously with the video ones, we're recording them. So we are going to collect them in a list and make sure that we share those out with everybody to say, here's what the collective feedback has been from everybody. And we 100% will be discussing them before we determine a final scope of what we move forward with. So that is a great question on there. And Mrs. Musselman, when will construction be done, mostly during the summer, and how will the school year be impacted? In terms of and let me just use the high school probably as the best illustrative example. We would construct a new wing onto the high school. And again, that would have to, it's probably be a 2 full years, almost, 365 days a year of construction to get it done in as quickly as we can. Now, doing that as an addition, we would continue to operate the building at full capacity as normally as we can. And then once the new wing is ready, we would open it up. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky, where, construction would get, would start to impact the school year, which is once we open up the new wing at the high school, we still have the main building that we have to renovate. And yes, we would work to try to maximize the summers. Summertime's not going to be enough to hit the couple 100,000 square feet that we have up at the high school. So once we got the new wing done, probably what we'd be faced with is for the first probably year or so, or maybe even 2, closing down hallways of the building at a time, moving them into the new wing so that we then could go in and renovate like first floor art wing classrooms. So we'd move all the art classes over to the new wing. We would then go in and renovate all the art classrooms, when they were done, we'd move those teachers back, and then we would move on to the next part of the building and maybe relocate all of the second floor biology classrooms. Then we'd go out to the new wing. We would go in and renovate all of the biology classrooms, and then we would move those teachers back. So there would be a lot of moving parts to this. Is it ideal? No, this is a common practice. I know that's been used to try to get work done in a time efficient process as possible. So for the high school and the middle schools, because we'd be adding the additions, we wouldn't have to consider like mobile classrooms or doing things like that. When we get to the elementary schools, quite honestly, we'd probably have to set up some modular classrooms out back, and would cycle classrooms out to the modulars while the renovations would be going on during the school year. And again, we'd make sure that those areas are completely closed off to students and staff while the work's done, completely safe. It is standard practice, that everybody has their clearances to coming in while, if construction's going on while the school years are operating. And again, we would do everything in our power to minimize those impacts. And just the reality is to try to get this work done and not have it take 30 years. Work will have to go on during the school year. But thank you for that question. And again, thank you everybody that has posted the questions in the chat. So any other questions, either in the Q&A or that someone wants to raise their hand and offer a verbal comment this morning? Mrs. Musselman, will any of the funding be coming from the general school budget? So that is a good question. What we'll have to be working through. So the short answer there is yes and no. So we have been working as we have looked to improve our district finances. Is we have finally established a capital projects fund, of which we do have some money put aside in there. As we sit today, that phase one, high priority one work, we have almost enough in our capital reserve right now to pay for that work. To take on $300 million, yeah, we're going to be looking at, we would say general fund dollars or general, additional state revenue and money that we would then put into the capital reserve fund. We also, quite honestly, would be looking to borrow money. So again, this wouldn't be like an annual, we would borrow like the high school project. I believe we got an early estimate, I think $40 million or $45 million for the new wing plus the renovation probably pushes it to about a $70 or $80 million project. We would finance that through a public bonding process. And, from there, we would, like you said, between capital reserve and through general fund would make the debt payments going back. And we do have the ability, again, to kind of stretch it out like a mortgage. We don't have to pay it all back at once. We don't have to have all that $80 million sitting in general fund at one time. We can finance it over time. Fortunately, as a public entity, we do get better interest rates than even are available to the public. But one of the important pieces there is we will need to see an increase in state funding that we can then invest towards making those debt payments so that we don't have to raise taxes to do so. So I think I answered that question in terms of with kind of how it gets paid for. And when we get closer, certainly, Mr. Miller, our Chief Financial Officer, would do some public presentations on exactly how we intend to pay for this and what the impact would be on the budget and on taxpayers and things like that. So thank you for that question. Our anonymous attendee, we have a kindergarten student next fall and a current kindergarten student headed to first grade next year. Based on the timeline and phases, there seems to be uncertainty with where they would end up going to middle school and or the proposed 5, 6, and 7, 8. What is the timeline for the middle school changes? No, that is a great question, and thank you for that. So again, all of this depends on when we finish this process on what we bring to the board as a recommendation and what they would approve. If I would say optimistically, if the major pieces of this are supported by the board and we stay on track with this, it would be 2 years of phase one work. We then, and again, during those 2 years, we're doing the architecturals and prepping for the high school project. We're then doing 2 years of the high school build while we're doing the all of the front loading for the middle school project. So that puts us at 4 years out. We probably break ground optimistically 4 years in, maybe 5 years in on the middle school project. We'd be looking at probably a 2 to 3 year construction window there. So we're looking probably of when the 5th grade building would open. If everything went perfectly, I'd say the earliest is probably 6 years from now. When again, we'd probably open both the 5, 6, and 7, 8 simultaneously. Actually, we'd have to do that based on the reconfiguration piece. So I'd say the earliest, if everything went ideally, and again, everything we stay on track with what we're asking everyone to consider right now, we'd be looking probably 6 to 7 years from now on the middle school pieces to take effect. And Mrs. Musselman, were teachers involved in the planning process? They were. We did invite, as the same as we invited our parents and community members and families. We did have representatives, our administrative, our teaching staff, and our support staff as part of the workshop process. And we continue to invite them to be part of our town halls. We've had some great feedback at some of our earlier town halls from teachers. And again, we continue to listen and learn from everybody before we move any of this forward, which is why, again, I want to stress, all of these are things we're asking people to consider. We're not at a recommendation phase yet for a lot of reasons. A lot of those are financial and timing, but also we want to make sure we get this right. I mean, if we're going to spend $300 million, we've got, I don't want to say one chance to do this right, but we've one chance to do this right. And again, it's going to be money and investment that carries us forward, beyond whatever a 10-year construction window for the next 10 to 20 to 30 or more years moving forward as a school district. So, no, Mrs. Musselman, very much so. We want to make sure we've offered and we continue to offer the voice of our teachers to make sure that we get this right before we move forward. So thank you. Dr. Weichert, thank you for yours. Thank you for continuing to look out for the best interests of our students and community. I'm confident the team will consult our local environmental agencies to make sure we consider the impacts, water management, flooding. Dr. Weichert, I'm going to pause there. 100% no project moves forward without all of those things being addressed. And also, I think one of the things we'll have opportunities to consider as part of construction is, can we be even more environmentally friendly with green energy? Can we look at incorporating more solar, and really take a look at our carbon footprint when we do all these projects. So, certainly we want to consider the open space in our district, since we want to make sure that our students have, again, it's all about those learning experiences and setting up our learning spaces best for kids. So thank you for your comments that you posted in the chat. Mrs. Milligan, question, how do you go from consideration to recommendation to approval? And will there be additional opportunities for community input? So Mrs. Milligan, yes. So we are finishing the last of our planned town halls this evening at Aclamo. I know at our last town hall meeting, there was a request for some additional dates, and I've already brought that to the administrative team. And we're going to look to offer probably a good 4 or 5 more sessions from our community. We then, we'll gather, we're going to post all that information. And as we move that to recommendation, it'll be, the administration really listening and fine tuning that. And then ultimately we'll bring it to our board committees for some formal discussion. And eventually those recommendations will go to the board. All of those are public processes, both the Facilities and Finance Committee, where probably a recommendation would go when we were looking to move a recommendation forward, would start there. And then again, it would have to go publicly to the board, which again, people are very welcome to come to those meetings was we asked the board to consider eventually voting on a recommendation to move it forward. So there will be many, many more opportunities for us to move to evolve the considerations and get them to recommendations, but ultimately it is the school board's responsibility to for approval. And again, those are done in public settings, and they will be well advertised. We will let people know when anything is going to move from a consideration to a recommendation, and when any of those things are going to be on board agendas, we'll make sure that they are well advertised and known to the public. And like you said, we're still, I don't want to say a ways off, because I think we're hearing a lot of good sentiment for some big pieces of the plan. We've gotten some good feedback on some things that I know some shared interest partners have asked us to reconsider, and we're certainly going to do that before we take any next steps moving forward. So thank you for I think that's a great set of questions and great information for our public in terms of what we're going to do in terms of next steps. You are welcome, Mrs. Milligan. My pleasure. Anybody else with any input, questions, thoughts? Oh, thank you so much. You are welcome again. This is a big commitment to our anonymous attendee who said thank you for the info. The reason we're doing this is because we're not going to go down this road quickly or lightly. $300 million is a big lift. And as I talked about, when we go down this road, we have a real opportunity to do something different and significant for our students and our community. I think it sends such a wonderful message to this community that we are serious about investing in our schools and in Norristown. But with that, we want to make sure that we do it thoughtfully, intentionally, and do it right, that in a way that's going to carry us forward. So thank you so much for that. Mrs. Musselman, again, thank you for your kind words there. Anybody else, any questions, thoughts, or input? Thank you, Dr. Weichert. Well, if we've no additional thoughts or questions or input or feedback, I'm going to call a close to today's town hall and give everyone the gift of time back in their day. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, please continue to monitor the district website as we collect the thoughts and feedback and get that public. And please look for additional town hall and input opportunities as we continue to move this forward. Wishing everybody a wonderful day and Friday. Friday, wow, I wish it was Friday. Have a wonderful Tuesday. And thanks so much for joining us today. Everybody be well and looking forward to seeing everyone soon.